Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of SRE Practitioner Series. I'm your host, Suresh GP. We are at episode number 7. Today, I have esteemed guest, Jeff Wozniak, currently the Director of Site Reliability Engineering at Umbra. He's been an SRE in Santa Barbara, California since 2015. Jeff started his SRE journey at Logic Monitor, carving a niche, writing tooling and automation to solve operational problems. Since taking a director role at Umbra in 2021, his focus has shifted to the problems of building platforms and reliable processes to scale the entire SRE function. Thanks, Jeff, for taking time today and being with us to share your insights of the SRE journey. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Suresh. Happy to be here.
So give us a little bit of background on what really excites you on the SRE space. I know you've been there for a quite number of years now. So if you look back on your journey, what do you think has been your experience so far on the SRE stint?
I've really enjoyed just the various opportunities to touch various different parts of the technology, of the business. I think one of the things with SRE is that there's such a broad array of topics that kind of are encompassed there that, you can sort of pick your own adventure within that. If you want to focus on automation, you can do that. If you want to write code, you can do that. If you want to just focus on hardware and infrastructure, you can do that. So I think the thing that I really appreciate the most is just the flexibility and that there's always something new that, if I need a new challenge or I want to take on something else, that's available within the space. And I've been fortunate to, work with people and companies that, have plenty of things to do and the opportunity for me to do those things. So I've just been enjoying, learning and keeping interested.
Great. So kickstarting off, how do you look at the site reliability engineering role in legacy monolithic environments? Because many of the people that I interact with across the globe think that SRE does a great job with cloud native applications, but I tell them and I insist them that the SRE principles and practices are still sound enough that we can apply it into the legacy environment. So what's been your experience and how do you look at the SRE role? If an organization has got a large amount of legacy systems and infrastructure, how do you think the role is going to be helping their organizations to move up?
I think first and foremost, that kind of depends on the business and the goals of the specific situation. Some businesses may be monolithic and wanting to, transfer and upgrade and move into the cloud. They may want to break into microservices. And so, in kind of that situation, where there's a desire for change in the business, I think, in addition to what people typically think of SRE, I think there's also just a large component of teaching and education, to really bring the business and, wherever the engineering team might be, to sort of translate that knowledge and those principles that SRE comes from to be able to run successfully in these other environments. So I think in those situations, it's at least as technical as it is social. On the other hand, maybe you're at a older bank and you've got a mainframe, or you're just not in a business that it makes sense to make these large changes to your infrastructure, and the SRE function is just to you're there to provide SRE to the existing monolithic architecture, and at that point, who knows? I think that's extremely situationally dependent, but you can still apply a lot of those principles, and there are even things without changing the overall architecture that SRE can provide to improve reliability and bring some of the, more modern tooling and designs to that. It may not be, changing that into a microservice architecture, but you can still build, automation and reliability and all of these things, within a monolithic architecture.
Right. And many of the people that I've seen still seem to be struggling beyond monitoring, right? I mean, think about your app monitoring or infra monitoring. While there's a lot of emphasis on observability, people just find this observability a completely misleading one, because they still are struggling to find out how observability will play a role in the kind of the distributed environment that we operate on. So how do you suggest for someone who's got the basic, the four golden signals of monitoring in place, how do they step up their game towards the observability part? Where do they start? How do they, what are the prerequisites and what they need to focus upon in the observability space?
I think mindset is a big component of that, and just really understanding what observability means to you and your platform, and what is actually important. I think it's very easy to have there's kind of two extremes that are probably neither that great. It's very easy to say, I want to collect every single piece of data emitted. I want to instrument everything, and I just have an entire lake of metrics. Or on the other hand, maybe you're not quite there. You don't see the value in observability, and it's okay for your customers to tell you that you're down. Hopefully that's not that's kind of on the extreme bad practice of SRE, but there's under collection is the other side of the spectrum. And I think in order to really do monitoring and observability well, you have to know your system to know what's important and what the extremely powerful signals are through all the noise. Otherwise, if you're collecting all this data, it can be hard to pick out what's important and display and surface the right data at the right time. I think that also kind of can tend to lend itself to alert fatigue. If you're collecting all this, all this data, you have it, you want to alert on it, right? Maybe, maybe not, but the temptation there is much stronger. And so, I like to keep a strong focus on what's the minimum amount of observability that I need to have to feel comfortable with the system. And maybe that's not going to be 100% coverage. Nobody's going to get there, whether you're full-blown alert fatigue or you're not collecting anything. But it gives you a solid platform that you can feel confident going to sleep at night that you're going to get paged if something goes wrong, and if something falls through the cracks. That's kind of the nature of what we're doing. Make a mistake, but don't make the same mistake twice. Then very clearly, you can go back and I need to shore up my monitoring or my observability in this particular capacity or for this specific scenario. And so you kind of get the very broad low fidelity at the beginning, and then as you understand where you need more resolution, you can kind of build it in. And I think kind of taking that informed approach has worked well for me.
Right. And it's also a lot of the tool vendors have brought in that level of sophistication. Do you think that we need to do some level of prep before we get into the tools approach of it? What would you say when we start using some of those tools for observability purposes?
I think, I think that kind of, similar to the metrics, having too many tooling options can also potentially lead you astray, or, tempt you to, maybe there's a big push for, AI and, anomaly detection.
Yeah.
And, I think that's a great target to get to. I think it really makes sense conceptually. I think that, I think that it's hard for as humans, and especially as engineers, to kind of like let go of that hard control of, I want to set these thresholds, and I don't want to trust that, this algorithm is going to do the right thing. So I think there's some level of trust there that needs to be developed. And I think there's probably also a decent bit of maturity that needs to happen in that space. But again, a tool is only as good as the person who's using that tool. So I think it all goes back to making sure that you have your priorities straight and you know what you're trying to accomplish, and then choosing the tools to meet those goals, rather than having the tools drive what you're actually doing in your prem.
And the next question is, people tend to compare between DevOps and SRE. So from your perspective, what's the level of maturity do you think an organization should have from a DevOps standpoint for SRE to take off? Is there any kind of principle guidelines towards the pipelines and orchestration that you would need before we even start thinking about reliability and resilience?
I have a bit of a fortunate and unique perspective on kind of that topic. I had the great fortune when I came to Umbra early in 2020 to, inherit a total greenfield startup. So I started with an empty AWS account and was able to sort of build everything from there. And, coming to the infrastructure and the design, with SRE at the very beginning, I think really allowed us to lay a solid groundwork and foundation for, not only the way that the system is designed, but, the processes and the team structure. So I think that, at a certain point, the earlier you can, start applying these principles, the less technical debt and the less refactoring you're going to have to approach down the line. Not everybody is that fortunate. Not all companies start out, in the 20 teens and are able to, there's people out here there inheriting infrastructure and systems all the time. And so, I think that there's no time like the present to start applying these principles. If you're at a point in your business where you're hiring an SRE team, hopefully that's something that's important to you, and you want to invest in change. And so whether or not your DevOps practices evolve to a certain point by then or not, it would seem that the directive is to get there. And so, whatever the state is, if you're looking for SRE, it's time to get your hands dirty and do that work, whether you're starting at 0.0 or, you're starting with a company that's been around for 20 years. I think that, there's benefits to be had from SRE no matter what level of maturity you're at.
Sure. In terms of, I saw you hiring a lot of SRE engineers and other stuff. What kind of skill sets do you look out for someone to fit in the belt of being an SRE? What kind of things? Because it's always a very interesting question to understand from everybody's perspective in the way that you apply it in your own context of the organization.
Sure. I think that personality is a huge part of hiring for SRE. I'm not sure, about the broad experience, but for me, that's always been either the focus of hiring in interviews, or if not, that tends to become the focus after hiring somebody really quickly if you don't get the right mindset. And so I think far more important than any technical skill is having the mindset of, what you're doing is important, that, your customers matter, and that your actions have real world consequences, and there's urgency tied to these things. I read recently, earlier this week, actually, preparing for this talk, Suresh, I found a great blog by DataWire about the topic was, site reliability versus platform engineering. And there's a really good section in there about kind of the different mindsets and mentalities for the two disciplines, and what makes one successful in one versus the other. And I thought not only was it very interesting, but it was very accurate in that, a good solid SRE, loves troubleshooting. They love getting down into the weeds, the details, they love the rush of, there's an outage. Let's go, we got to get the lights back on kind of thing. And, platform engineers tend to be more like software engineers. You want to work in leisure. You don't want to be stressed. You're designing something, for everybody else to use. And it's just kind of a different vibe. But I think that it's very accurate. If you don't like feeling that rush, it's going to be much harder for you to feel that sense of urgency in the moment when your data center is down. And so I think there's something very fundamental about personality types and really being successful and thriving in the role.
Excellent. That's a great point in terms of differentiating between a platform engineers and other stuff. So if I'm not wanting to be on an adrenaline every day, I would probably want to rethink whether I do want to play the role of an SRE or not, because at the end of the day, you should enjoy what you're doing. Otherwise, you might have the greatest of technical skills, but you're not enjoying your role, then you're not be at your best to deliver value. Absolutely great on. So, so my final question would be, based on your experience, what do you think are some of the lessons that you have learned that we would like to, communicate to this community? What has worked, what has not worked, some of the lessons learned throughout your journey, right? With all your constraints that you've played around, what's been your greatest learning and lessons learned that you could share with our viewers?
Yeah, I think, there's a whole handful of little things here and there, that I like to say and repeat. But I think, toward the most important is, maybe it's the business atmosphere, maybe it's, SRE generally, but I think that sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. And there's always, this driver, whether it's, internally or externally, from sales or product or, wherever else that may come from, to just get stuff out the door. And I think, I think everybody has kind of had that experience and, recognizes on its face that, can be kind of, short-sighted, and, that's how you incur technical debt and you cut corners and you end up, 2 or 3 years down the line, you've got this system that everybody hates and it's just a time suck on everybody to maintain. Nobody really wants to maintain it, but it's providing this functionality that you can't get rid of, where, maybe if you had taken the time or, been able to pause and, really think about it and architect that well, in the first place, you would have all these free resources down the line to do other things to accelerate and move things faster. So I think that, scaling is such a big topic, for SRE, that's kind of a day-to-day concern, but I think that there's a lot more to scaling than just on the specific technical side of things. There's a lot more that can scale, from the SRE, but also, SRE helping to, scale the business, more greatly, whether it's, looking at a more platform-based mindset to SRE so that, your developers can scale within your platform without having additional dependencies, or, by being smart about how you're implementing things and freeing up more resources for the business that allows you to just scale the SRE function more generally because you have more bandwidth, and it's easier to automate things because, you're thinking 3 steps ahead and what is going to kind of need to be in place for all these things to play together. So I think, keeping that bigger picture mindset and kind of the longer game in place, I think will hopefully, given the right environment around you, we'll buy a little bit of space and realize, take a breath, slow down a little bit, and think about what you really want to do here. I think is not a very technical answer, but I think that, everybody's technology stack is different, but everybody's role is so similar. And so I think that those are the kind of things that cut across everywhere, rather than, set the setting on your compiler or something like that.
And I think the future for SRE looks bright. What do you think? It seems to be everybody's ramping around to get the right SREs and other stuff. So do you see the future of SRE being bright? And what did you tell for someone who's aspiring to be an SRE based on these conversations that we are having?
I think the future is bright. I think that there's a large component of businesses out there that could benefit, their business and their product from a stronger IT presence, whether that's software development or even, just powering the way that they're running their business more efficiently. That, the number of businesses that need engineers and SREs, I think, is only going to, explode as the cost and complexity of entry, gets lower. So I think that there's just going to be more and more need for that going into the future. And, for people that are thinking about going into SRE, going back to personality, you really have to, I think the first thing is to really understand what it's going to take from you, and personality wise, is it a good fit? How do you feel about getting woken up at 3 a.m. and potentially having to, troubleshoot an outage for the next 6 hours? If that's just something that's totally off the table for you, it's probably not the right career. But if that excites you in some way, then, put the work in, learn the skills what you need. And, you're never going to have any shortage of, companies and roles that are looking for someone who, wants to get down in there and make things good for their customers, help the business scale. I think that that's the most important thing.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jeff, for spending your valuable time today and sharing your insights about different facets of SRE and your journey through that. I'm sure that our viewers will find it very inspiring, and we'll stay connected on that. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach out to you and share some ideas around SRE?
Probably my LinkedIn. I should have a better, I should know it off the top of my head. Let me find out what my LinkedIn link is.
Sure.
Wozniak Jeff is my LinkedIn. I can I'll send you a link, Suresh.
Sure. We'll put that up in the episode as we speak around. But it's been a delight, Jeff, having you at the Practitioner Series, and look forward to seeing you sometime physically in the years to come, right? And thank you so much for your time again.
Sure. Thanks for reaching out, Suresh. It was nice talking to you.